So over a period of time, these searches become much darker, and she's thinking about abortion things. Not only that, but she appears to be wrestling with her conscience. She's typed in Roe versus Wade for Dennis America, and case legalizing, to some extent, abortion. She's worried about miscarriage. She's thinking about perhaps an impending marriage. Again, she's thinking about abortions. And on the 22nd of May, it appears that her decision has been made for her. She might be recovering after a miscarriage. Towards the end of these searches, again, she's beginning to think of an impending marriage. So, and I've edited these searches down heavily, of course, but what this appears to be is the haunting and real life, affecting story of one woman's pregnancy. Her quarrel or her difference of opinion with her partner or as to whether it's wanted, or tussle with her conscience over a possible abortion, her miscarriage, and then thoughts about her impending marriage. Now, of course, we can't know all of this because the stuff that we type into our search engines isn't a complete approximation of our thought processes. But all the same, if you look through a lot of these searches, as I did when I was writing this book, and I spent quite a lot of time looking through a lot of this stuff, it's sometimes awesome in its sophistication, all of this data. And the best of these searches read like the kind of inchoate stories of our lives. And as a result, some people think that this information in the wrong hands might be a little bit scary. Let's take a second example. So, someone who's interested in sewing. So, again, this appears to be a woman who, certainly someone who's a dad handed a sewing machine, and who's thinking about making a bra. But a couple of weeks later, the tone of these searches changes quite drastically. Is this internet user contemplating a murder? Well, the evidence might suggest that she is, or he is. It's only after a couple of weeks looking through all of this information that we discover that in fact what she was doing some research into a real life murder case, not her own murder. The very famous unsolved murder, one of the most famous unsolved murders of modern American history, the killing of the 6-year-old beauty queen, JonBenet Ramsey. And we know that because a little while later she types in a search for a video featuring JonBenet's parents. Now, all of this is important, I think, because despite their oblique and fragmentary nature, the stuff that we type into these search engines is increasingly considered admissible in courts of law. In November 2005, for example, in North Carolina, there was a murder case, a case of murder by strangulation, in which the evidence was unveiled, apparently damning by the prosecution, that the defendant in that case had typed in the words neck and snap into Google shortly before the murder. This was evidence, of course, extracted from a personal computer at home rather than evidence filched from Google itself. So that raises all sorts of questions about data protection, privacy, and all of that. And we might come on to that in the discussion. Second issue that we might come on to in the discussion is the idea that many of us spend a lot of time looking in a voyeuristic way at other people's information on the internet, not only in this red-shirt-shaped thing here, but on blogs, through webcams. And some people would argue, I wouldn't quite go this far, that rather than listen to stories and watch stories on the TV, increasingly what we want is to look onto the real stories in other people's lives, to kind of twitch our curtains, in this case I call Cyburbia, and voyeuristically see what other people are up to, or try to reassemble our own stories. But beyond all of that, there are some more questions. 40 years ago, the very famous media guru called Marshall McLuhan, that I'm sure all of you have heard of, argued that the tools that we use to send and retrieve information, such as the book, for example, end up changing the way that we think and want to process information. And those tools, he felt, were going to change radically with the arrival of this incredible electronic information loop, because Marshall McLuhan, inspired by Norbert Wiener, was another guru of this idea called cybernetics, was incredibly prescient about the development of the internet before its time. So given the ready availability of information on search engines and our propensity for spending quite a lot of time using them, is it possible that all of this is changing the way that we want to process information, order our thoughts? Well, I think that in the long term, I mean, it's a speculation, but I think that it is. I mean, think about what's happening when you use a search engine, especially Google. What you're doing is you are typing in something into a search engine, you're sending out a message, and then you're responding to the feedback that comes in. And Google especially is a self-organizing system which works on the basis of you constantly feeding it back information and feeding it back rankings of how useful you find the information that it sends you. What we don't know from AOL's data is, or what we don't have any sense of, is what happened after each of those Google searches, after each of those AOL searches, because each search is only the beginning for a very long and winding adventure that an internet search user takes through the internet. And only at the end of all that do you look back to the search box and you start again, having hopped around along. Given all that, if you look through these searches as I did, what strikes you is the propensity for sudden twists and turns in people's thought processes. It's as if this rapidly whirring electronic information loop between our brain, our search box, and the various sites and links that we hop from as we kind of hop our way around the internet, it's as if that frees us up to be much more agile in the way that we think things through. And what comes out appears slightly different. It's as if it kind of short circuits our normal thinking and decision-making cycle. It's possible, though academic studies find it difficult to measure, that all of this changes the way that we want to process information. This kind of nimbly hopping around an electronic information loop changes the way that we want to process information, even when we step back from the search engine to live the rest of our life. It's possible, for example, that over the long term, this might compromise or at least change our ability to want to read a longer piece of journalism or even a book without switching very nimbly our attention away elsewhere. Another thing that strikes you from looking at all of this information, and it's very obvious, is that the information that we type into this isn't really our considered thoughts and reflections on things. The stuff that we type in more or less holds up a mirror to the disorder within our psyche. It's as if this kind of loop between our brain and our internet search box, this whirring information loop, short circuits, as I said before, our normal thinking and decision-making cycle. And what tumbles out onto that search box is a kind of formless mass of both thoughts and desires and impulses which lacks any clear focus or direction, and which, like a kind of external brain, can often spill out onto the rest of our lives.